Hey everyone, here's a quick explanation on classes in Elden Ring. I'm not going to go super in depth here, but I'm going to help you understand why we've got these different classes and what one you may want to pick as a new player to Elden Ring. So you can see all these different ones here. What are they all about? The first thing that we've got in classes is you can see we've got two looks per class, and that's a male or female. So you're free to pick whether you want to be male or female with any of these. And that doesn't make any difference to the stats or the capabilities of the character. It is purely the look of the character. So you're going to be looking a little more male or a little more female. The next thing that we've got here is you can see that the class equipment varies. So we've got different armor and we've also got different weaponry. Now, the armor is how protected you are in the game, and there are different weights of armor and different armor stats. And the weapons are, funny enough, how you fight in the game with your weapons, and these vary too. So, as we look through, you can see very different looks here, and you can probably get an idea of the differences between these slightly. Thinking, well, this dude, wait, which one is it? This one looks like, I don't even know. They've got this weird look, but they're not very good with the armor. They've got literally a sack on. So hopefully they're going to excel in something else. And you're quite right. This is to do with magic. This one looks like a classical mage, and you'd be right there. That's a magic user. This one looks more stealthy. Funny enough, stealthy there. So let's go through them and explain what we've got. You can get a better idea between or behind each of these by looking at the attributes, and you can show those down the bottom left hand side. You see it says show attributes, and this gives you a much better idea what each class is all about. Now, to understand what these attributes mean, I need to give you the basics of each one. I'm not going to go super in depth, but I'm going to help you sort of understand the fundamentals of these. First up, we have the level of the character. So the higher the level, in theory, the more robust the character. You have more points assigned to the core attributes below. So a level 9 warrior is better or more powerful than a level 1 wretch that we have here. Now you can see for each of these that those attributes are varying quite a bit. So why? What is the difference here? Well, each of these attributes allows you to excel in a particular area or of Elden Ring. Different stats will mean you're more effective at one thing over another. And the sort of fun part of Elden Ring character classes is thinking about where do you want to excel and where do you want to sacrifice, or do you want to be very balanced? So let's start with vigor. What is vigor? Vigor is how much health points you have in the game. So you've got more health, which means you can take more hits at you, and you're going to be able to survive a little bit longer with that. So it's a good thing to have plenty of vigor. So you can see that Vagabond has the highest, I think they're the highest vigor of the starting classes. So it's a good beginner class because you can get whacked a lot while you learn how to use the class. That said, you can adjust any of these over time, so don't be too hung up that you must start with a Vagabond. We'll talk about this in a minute. The mind affects how much FP you have in the game. There's a big blue bar, and that's primarily used for magic and some skills as well of your weapons. So that is more of interest to magic users than a dedicated melee user, unless you're going to be using a particular skill on a weapon that uses the FP a lot. So we'll talk about that as well. But you can see the mind of the Vagabond is 10, which is reasonable. But if we look at the mind of, say, the Astrologer or the Prophet, you can see the mind is much higher because these are magic-based classes. If we then look at the endurance, this is to do with the stamina. So as you start smashing out attacks with your character, so if the Vagabond is going to be swinging their sword or blocking an incoming attack with the shield, the stamina is going to take a hit. So the more endurance you have, the more effective or the more robust your defense is, and the more aggressive your attack is. So that really helps out with the stamina. Basically, sorry, not the more aggressive the attack, the more attacks you can swing. So each time you swing your sword, your stamina will deplete. Every time you get an aggressive block at you, your stamina will be depleted as well. And if your stamina goes to nothing, you're going to be moving really slow, and any incoming attack, you're just not going to be able to defend properly. So it's quite important, particularly for melee-based characters. The endurance also affects how heavy equipment you can carry. So armor in particular requires a lot of endurance to be able to use it effectively. And the more you increase this, the more gear you can wear, particularly armor. So if you're interested in wearing heavy armor for better defense, endurance is really going to help that. Or if you want to flick between multiple weapons whilst you're in combat, again, the endurance can help with that. Next up, we have strength, and strength is primarily used for hoofing big weapons around. So if you're interested in massive weapons like colossal swords and huge axes and stuff like that, strength is going to help you either equip them or wield them. And certain weapons will require certain stats to be able to use them. So if you're interested in melee-based weapons that are big, strength is going to be really important to you. Your other option is dexterity, and dexterity is used for more sort of what's the word I'm looking for? More delicate, not delicate, more exquisite weapons, I think is the word I'm looking for. So things like bows, katanas, things that move fast and require some skill to move and wield nicely. So you will find certain builds will be a bit better with dexterity. Dexterity can also help with spell casting speed as well. So it's not just used for characters, but you'll see, for example, the warrior, where you've got these dual swords and you can swing these rather nicely. Dexterity is a bit greater than the vagabond that we've got here, but the hero is more about brute strength, so less on dexterity and more about just hoofing the thing hard. We've then got intelligence, and intelligence is a prime requisite for anyone interested in sorcery. So one of the schools of magic is sorcery, and for that, intelligence is the thing that you really want to up. The greater the intelligence, the more spells you can use, and the more potent those spells will be when you cast them. So that's really important if you're interested in sorcery. The other type of magic is faith-based magic, which is incantation, and that one, you can see the prophet excels with that one, whereas the astrologer excels with the other one. So the difference between sorcery and incantation, sorcery is more about sort of, they look blue, a lot of the spells, and they are offensive and defensive, but you can't do things like healing with them. The faith-based magic is more about holy types of magic, and also you'll see incantations often are more fire-based, but you can also heal as well. So if you want a mixture of magic with healing, you're looking at faith-based incantations, whereas purely offensive or defensive spells. So you have some defensive ones like give you a big shield or something like that. You can go sorcery. Either magic is very powerful, so it's just personal preference which you prefer. Personally, I prefer faith-based incantations because I love the look of the fire spells, but that's just me. We've then got the samurai here, which is also a dexterity-based character. And these are hybrid characters that we're seeing here now when we come along. So if you want to be a little more, a little sort of, I suppose, more exquisite with your combat skills, and you also want to go close ranged and ranged, then this samurai is quite good fun, that you've got this nice fast moving character that will look cool when they're swiping that katana around, but they can also fight at distance with the bow as well. We've also got one last setting, which is arcane, which is used partly by magic users, and also it can help with discovery of items in the game. And certain spells require some arcane as well to be able to use effectively. I have a feeling there's something about arcane that I've totally forgotten about, but that gives you a basic idea of the differences between these. The other thing that you can see is that the equipment varies between each of these classes. So if we go right to the start and just have a quick look at what each one has, we have the Vagabond starts with a sword, a halberd, and a shield. We then have the Warrior starts with 2 swords and a shield. We have the Hero starts with an axe and a shield. So they're quite obvious which ones, what you get with those. The bandit starts with, I think it's a dagger, a small little shield, a little buckler, and a little bow. And they are a self-based character, so you can sneak around in Elden Ring. And this character is all about moving pretty quick, in and out, sneaking around, and they can discover stuff. You can see a high arcane value, but they have very light armor on, which means they can dodge and avoid stuff very quick. So you're all about getting in and out quick, doing the damage, doing the business, and getting out before you get hit. If we look at the astrologer starts with a staff, which is required for sorcery. If you do not have a staff, you cannot cast sorcery magic. They have some starting spells as well. They also got I think that's a dagger and a shield, so you've got some backup defense if required. But primarily, you're going to be casting magic to do your attack and your defense. The prophet starts with a spear and also a sacred seal. The Sacred Seal is what is used for incantation magic. So without that, you can't cast incantations. So you need to have that equipped. And also a shield there so they can defend a little bit if they're not using the Sacred Seal. The samurai has some pretty cool weaponry. They start with a very powerful katana and a bow and a shield, so they are able to attack both up close and at range. And they're quite a fun class, but they aren't magic based, although you can progress that. I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. Then we have the hybrid classes. So this is a mix of melee and magic. You have the prisoner, who is a little more geared towards intelligence side of things, so sorcery magic. So they have a staff, they have a sword, and they can do a bit of a mix. And personally, I think these two are the most fun to start with because you can dabble with both melee and magic. So my personal preference is Confessor because I like that mix of the faith and the combat. I like to do a bit of a mix of stuff, but some people will prefer going with the sorcery. And then lastly, if you're not sure which you want to go with, you've got the Wretch. Now, the Wretch is about the hardest starting class because they start with level 1. They don't have many stats, but all the stats are even. So they're a good class if you're unsure how you want to develop and you just want to dabble with stuff. But this is a painful class to begin with because you have no armor. All you have is a club. That's it, my friends. So based on all of that, is there any downside to picking any of these? Slightly. So, of course, you've got your starting weaponry, your starting armor, and if you go with something, say, like the Vagabond, you're going to be far more protected than if you start with the Wretch. The main difference comes later on when you decide you want to start specializing in something, or maybe you want to be quite even with your build. But generally, you will specialize towards something because you want to be very powerful at either melee or magic, and that magic may be sorcery or incantation, or maybe you want to be, really good with a bow. So you will tend to specialize towards one main area. And the one thing you can't do with Elden Ring as you level up is if you decide to respec later, which you can do a few hours into the game, you cannot set your stats below your starting stats of your character class. So if I pick the Vagabond, although I can mess around with any points I put in after level 9, I cannot respec them below these starting ones. So the faith cannot go below 9 or intelligence if you get that. So that is an argument for looking at the Wretch if you're not sure where you want to go, because those stats are very even all the way across, and then you can pump into extra things after that, but they are your core things. Hopefully that makes sense. I'd love to know which is your favorite class if you're an existing Elden Ring player, or if you're a brand new player, which class you're going to go for. My personal preference, I think, is the Confessor because I like that mix of magic and melee, and that's what I'm going to show in some tutorials moving forwards. But let me know which is yours. Thanks for watching.